Hello guys, welcome back. This is the last part of the acute kidney injury, and in this part we will first talk about the classification. So the classification is this is a KDIGO classification, that is a kidney disease improving global outcome. This classification is basically the criteria for the acute kidney injury. Then how will you know that the acute kidney injury is in which stage? So for the staging of the acute kidney injury, the KDIGO criteria is made, and so let's talk about this criteria. So first of all, let's talk about the stage 1. So stage 1 we will call when if the serum creatinine level increases than 1.5 to 1.9 times than the normal value. So the normal range of the serum creatinine is 0.84 to 1.21 milligram per deciliter. But if the value of serum creatinine increases 1.5 or 1.9 times the normal range, then we will call it as a stage 1. And the urine output in this stage is basically less than 0.5 ml per kg per hour, and this condition should be at least for 6 to 12 hours. Then we will call it as in a stage 1. So the stage 1 is at a risk of the acute kidney injury, is not totally the kidney injury has not occurred in stage 1. In stage 2, the serum creatinine is increased by 2 to 2.9 times the normal range, and the urine output is same as in stage 1, that is 0.5 less than 0.5 ml per kg per hour. But in stage 1, the urine output is similar, but that should be for 6 hours. But if it persists for 12 hours or more, then we will call it stage 2. And the risks, while talking about it is actually known as injury. So in the stage 1, the injury was not happened, but in stage 2 the injury has happened, so it is actually injured stage is stage 2. And in stage 3, the serum creatinine increases by 3-fold, and the urine output is less than 0.3 ml per kg per hour for 24 hours. So this is the stage where the failure has taken place. So we will call this as a stage as a acute renal failure. So this is actually the KDIGO classification of the acute renal failure. The concept of the acute kidney injury came as we want to actually early identify the disease process. So that's why early identification of the disease is very necessary. And for the early identification of disease, we have some biomarkers that will be detected in urine. Basically, these biomarkers are detected in urine, and these biomarkers are neutrophil gelatinase associated lipocalcin, kidney injury molecule, they are also known as KIM1, and interleukin 18. So these are some biomarkers which will help in early detection of the acute kidney injury, as the serum creatinine will increase only after the half of the kidney is already damaged, then only the serum creatinine level increase. So that will be very late. So when we will see the serum creatinine, it is very late diagnosed. So that's why we will see the biomarker for the early diagnosis of AKI. But though the biomarkers are usually not done, as these are very costly, and the biomarker tests are not available at every hospital or every clinical settings. So what are the investigation we should do in the acute kidney injury? So first of all, the investigation, whenever the acute kidney injury patient will come, I will tell you about the symptom later. First I will talk about investigation. The investigation are increased serum creatinine. So simply you will do serum creatinine, and in serum creatinine you will see there will be increased level of serum creatinine. Another thing, there will be increased level of blood urea nitrogen. The GFR will get decreased, and decreased urine output, and basically the sodium level is decreases. Why the sodium level decreased? Actually the sodium level is not decreased, but basically as the GFR is decreased, there is a more amount of fluid in the blood. Due to this there is a volume overload. We can say there is a volume overload in blood, and this is known as hypervolemic condition. And due to the excess amount of blood, there will be dilutional type of hyponatremia. So this is hypervolemic dilutional hyponatremia. And as the GFR is decreased, the potassium excretion is also actually decreased, and due to the potassium excretion decreased, there will be hyperkalemia, and this hyperkalemia can be seen in the ECG as a tall T wave. So in ECG, if you will see, it will be like this. So this is a P, this is a Q, R, S, and this is a T. So you can see the T wave is very large. So this is a tall T wave. So tall T wave. So tall and taunted T wave is seen in case of hyperkalemia, and the hyperkalemia is basically due to the decreased glomerular filtration rate. So what is the reason for the hyperkalemia in case of acute kidney injury? So basically there are three reasons for the hyperkalemia in case of acute kidney injury. One of the reason is impaired potassium excretion in acute kidney injury. As we know, in acute kidney injury, for temporarily the renal function is somehow decreased, and due to which the renal cannot excrete the potassium in a normal amount, and due to which there will be a potassium retention in the blood, and there will be hyperkalemia. In case of burns or hemolysis or sepsis, what happens? There is a large amount of cellular damage, and when the cells are damaged or destroyed, you know that inside the cells potassium ions are found, and due to which those potassium ions, whenever cell burst out or cell are damaged, the potassium releases from the cells and come into circulation, and so that's why the potassium is increased. And the hyperkalemia can also occur in the AKI due to the metabolic acidosis. So let's see how in metabolic acidosis hyperkalemia occurs. So before talking about the cause of hyperkalemia, I should tell you why the metabolic acidosis occurs in case of acute kidney injury. So as we know, in acute kidney injury, for the temporary time, the renal function to excrete the organic as well as non-organic acids, whatever that is produced in the body, that is not excreted well in case of acute kidney injury. And when that organic as well as non-organic acids are not excreted well, then what happens? Due to the non-excretion, acidosis occurs. And the acidosis occurs, it means simply the H plus content in the blood is increased. So simply you will see that the H plus content increases in blood. Now let's suppose this is a blood vessel and these are the cells, and let's suppose there is a acidosis, and due to which there is an increased H plus in the blood. And whenever there is increased H plus in the blood, this increased H plus causes the potassium ion from inside the cell to move into the blood vessel, or we can say extracellular fluid, and H plus comes inside the cell. So their movement is like that the H plus goes inside the cell, and whatever the positive ion is the positive ion of the cell comes outside the cell, that is comes in extracellular. So the increased H plus causes the movement of potassium ion from cells to extracellular fluid. So the potassium ion moves from the cells to the extracellular fluid, and due to which there will be increased potassium in blood. Due to which there is increased potassium in blood. So this is one of the compensatory mechanism to actually decrease the H plus content in the blood. But yes, there is in every good thing there is a bad event also attached with it. So the bad event is that the H plus goes inside the cell, then the acidosis decreases, but somehow it will lead to the hyperkalemia, and the hyperkalemia may cause the cardiac arrhythmia. So it will lead to the cardiac arrhythmia. So this is the problem that occurs in case of hyperkalemia. So you can see that in acute kidney injury there were three main causes of hyperkalemia. We have to do the ultrasound, so renal ultrasound, and we have to do the abdominal ultrasound. So basically abdominal pelvis USG is done, and this USG is done to rule out different conditions. It is done to rule out basically the stones in kidney. It is also done to rule out any cancerous mass in bladder, or the cancerous mass in kidney. It is also done to rule out the renal artery stenosis. So to rule out the renal artery stenosis, we will also do the renal ultrasound. So these are the basically investigation done. And another investigation is the arterial blood gas analysis. So A, B and G. So in arterial blood gas analysis, what happens? Basically, the condition that in the case of the acute kidney injury, there will be the metabolic acidosis. There will be the metabolic acidosis. So why there will be the metabolic acidosis? As we know, first of all, the protons present in the blood, whatever the protons present in the blood will not excrete out due to the decreased GFR, and due to these protons there will be the metabolic acidosis. So the pH will be less than 7.35. So the pH will be less than 7.35 and the bicarbonate level will be less than 22. So this implies the metabolic acidosis. That's why to rule out the metabolic acidosis, we will also do the arterial blood gas analysis. Now let's suppose if anyone has an acute kidney injury and you diagnose is that there is presence of acute kidney injury, and now how will you differentiate? The AKI is basically the renal AKI or the pre-renal AKI. So how will you differentiate the acute kidney injury is renal or pre-renal? So to differentiate the acute kidney injury is renal or pre-renal, we have a test known as FENA. The FENA stands for basically fractional excretion of sodium. Fractional excretion of sodium. So FENA stands for fractional excretion of sodium. Now let's see how will you differentiate the a renal and pre-renal AKI by FENA. So let us suppose this is a glomerulus. So let's suppose if anyone has cholera or pre-renal condition AKI. So what happens usually in pre-renal acute kidney injury, the blood flowing to the efferent arteriole is decreased. So let's suppose this is the efferent arteriole, this is a glomerulus and this is the efferent arteriole. Now what happens? The blood incoming to the efferent arteriole decreased. So as the efferent arteriole is basically the blood coming to efferent arteriole decreased, there will be less actually filtrate coming to the tubules, and if there will be less filtrate coming to the tubules, what happens? The tubule will absorb the more amount of water from this less amount of filtrate. So more amount of water and more amount of salt is absorbed. Why the more amount of salt and water is absorbed? As the less amount of efferent as the less amount of blood is flowing through the efferent arteriole, as there is a pre-renal AKI. So less amount of blood flows through the efferent arteriole, so less amount of urine is filtered, and the less amount will remain in more time in the tubules, and that's why there will be more water and more salt absorption, and due to which ultimately whatever the urine comes, the sodium level in the urine is decreased. The sodium level in the urine is decreased. So we will call this the fractional excretion of sodium is basically decreased in case of the pre-renal acute kidney injury. But let's suppose in any renal causes, of acute kidney injury, what happens? That the amount of whatever the amount is filtered in the renal tubules is actually in normal amount. But when it goes through the tubules, what happens? As we know, in the renal causes of AKI, the tubules were damaged. The tubules and the tubular cells were damaged. So this is a damaged tubular cells, and the damaged tubular cells cannot absorb the salt, and usually the salt cannot be absorbed and the water cannot be absorbed in a well way. So the salt water is not absorbed, and due to this less amount of absorption of the salt water, as there is a damage to the tubular cells. So there is a damage to the tubular cells in the renal AKI, and due to which decreased absorption of salt. And if there will be decreased absorption of salt, then whatever the urine comes, there will be increased amount of sodium in the urine. So we will say that the fractional excretion of the sodium in urine is increased. So you saw that in the two conditions the scenario was different. In the pre-renal condition, So in the pre-renal condition, the fractional excretion of sodium was decreased, but in the renal AKI, fractional excretion of sodium is increased. So in this way, by only seeing the fractional excretion of sodium, we can know the cause is renal or pre-renal. One more thing can diagnose the renal and pre-renal AKI, that as we know, in the pre-renal AKI, there is a more amount of salt and water absorption. So whatever the urine comes, the urine will be more concentrated. So we can say that the urine osmolarity is actually increased in case of the pre-renal AKI, and that's how the it is greater than 500 milliosmol per liter. So urine osmolarity is increased and is greater than 500 milliosmol per liter in case of the pre-renal AKI. But in case of the renal AKI, the salt and water both are not absorbed in a good way, in a proper amount. That's why whatever the urine comes, there will be more amount of water in the urine. That's why the urine osmolarity is basically decreased. That is around 300 milliosmol per liter. So by seeing the urine osmolarity also, you can know the pre-renal or renal cause of AKI. We should also look for the phosphate level in case of the acute kidney injury, as there will be increased phosphate level in case of acute kidney injury, that is known as hyperphosphatemia. So why there is hyperphosphatemia? There are two causes. First cause is there is increased cellular destruction in some cases of AKI, like the sepsis or hemolysis, and as we know, the phosphate are found primarily in the cells, and whenever there is cellular destruction, the phosphates are released in the blood, and due to which increased phosphate release in the blood, the phosphate level is increased. Another cause is, let's suppose there is such a AKI in which there are less cellular destruction, so there will be normal phosphate production. So there is normal phosphate production, but whatever the phosphate comes in the blood should actually go into the renal tubular cells. Whatever the phosphate actually produces should actually go into the renal tubular cells, and the tubular cells secrete those phosphate into the tubular lumen, and that's why in this way they are excreted out from the body. What I said, that whatever the phosphates are produced, normally also there are some amount of phosphate production, so whatever there is a basic phosphate production in the body, that phosphate from the blood goes to the tubular cells of the kidney, and from the tubular cells secrete those phosphate into the tubular lumen, and from the tubular lumen those phosphates are basically excreted in the form of urine. But when the tubular cells are damaged, if the tubular cells is damaged, then what happens? The tubular cells cannot secrete the phosphate into the tubular lumen and in the urine, and in this way there will be accumulation of phosphate in the blood, and due to which there will be hyperphosphatemia. The high level of phosphate in the blood actually attaches the calcium with them. So they attach calcium present in blood, and when the calcium present in the blood is attached to the phosphate, then the blood calcium level decreases. So blood calcium decreases, and whenever the blood calcium decreases, it will ultimately lead to the hypocalcemia. But this hypocalcemia is not very severe hypocalcemia, but the hypokalemia can be manifested in ECG by seeing the long QT segment. So this hypocalcemia will be manifested by the long QT segment in ECG. And so let's suppose in ECG we have the P, Q, R, S and T, and the starting of the key to end of the T is QT segment. So this QT segment, normally it has a duration, but what happens in case of the AKI, so this QT segment is somehow prolonged than the normal value. So this occurs due to the hypocalcemia. There will be increased QRS duration, there will be increased the QT ST segment, and there will be increased duration of T wave also. So in this way there will be QT segment prolongation that will be due to the hypocalcemia, and this hypocalcemia is usually moderate type, which usually do not require any specific treatment. So this is rarely required treatment. Now let's talk about the symptoms of acute kidney injury. So while talking about the symptoms, we have to understand that in the acute kidney injury, the main thing is that there is increased level of urea in the blood, and this increased level of urea in the blood is basically due to the reason that the kidney is not able to filter the urea from the blood, as the GFR is low, glomerular filtration rate is low or decreased. That's why the urea is not filtered out from the blood, and that's why there is an increase in urea. But what happens when the urea level increase in blood? So the symptom that occur due to increased urea. So first symptom that will affect the stomach. So let's suppose this is a stomach and the blood supply is everywhere. So the high level of urea in blood actually irritate the stomach mucosa. So let's suppose this is stomach mucosa. So this stomach mucosa is actually irritated by the increased level of urea, and whenever the stomach mucosa is irritated, either it leads to the vomiting, or it leads to the diarrhea, due to the peristalsis or reverse peristaltic movement. So this is the cause that initially the patient will suffer from the vomiting and diarrhea like symptom. Not only this increased level of urea will also cause the diaphragm irritation. So let's suppose these are the lungs, and now we have a diaphragm that separates the abdominal cavity and thoracic cavity. So this is, let's suppose, diaphragm. So this diaphragm is basically irritated by the this diaphragm is irritated by urea, and when the diaphragm is irritated, then what happens? It will lead you to hiccups. So there will be recurrent hiccups in case of the acute kidney injury. The high level of urea will also cause the problem in the pericardium of heart. And will lead to the inflammation of pericardium, that is pericarditis. And as we know, whenever there is a pericarditis, one of the pericardium, that is basically the parietal pericardium, is actually pain sensitive, and due to which it will lead to the chest pain. So such type of pericarditis is known as uremic pericarditis. So this uremic pericarditis is basically due to increased level of urea in blood and will lead you to the chest pain. So the third symptom that is due to increase in urea is due to the is actually chest pain. Another thing, the urea can cross the let's suppose this is the brain, and let's suppose this is the barrier, and let's suppose this is a blood. So the urea from the blood can enter into the brain by crossing the blood-brain barrier. Let's suppose this is a blood-brain barrier. So the urea from the blood vessel can cross and come into the brain and irritate the brain, and will cause the encephalopathy. So it can cause the encephalopathy, and this encephalopathy will lead to seizure and cerebral edema. So these are the thing. So the cerebral edema, the features of cerebral edema, the seizure, the headache. It can also lead to the headache. So these are the initial symptoms of acute kidney injury that the patient will suffer from: the vomiting, diarrhea, hiccups, chest pain, seizure, headache, cerebral edema, and I think you knew the cause also. So whatever symptom that occur due to the increased level of urea are collectively termed as uremia, and uremia are the initial features or initial symptom that we will see in case of acute kidney injury. So these are basically the initial symptom basically seen in the case of acute kidney injury. The uremic pericarditis can cause the pericardial effusion, and the effusion may lead to the pericardial tamponade. So there will be, in pericardial tamponade, there will be decreased cardiac function, and there can be the manifestation and the clinical signs and symptoms of the cardiac tamponade. So what are the clinical signs and symptoms of cardiac tamponade? Please watch the video of cardiac tamponade, then you will know. And on examination, in these cases, on examination, on auscultation, basically we will heard a sound known as pericardial friction rub. So pericardial friction rub can be heard in case of the uremic pericarditis. Now you should understand that in AKI what happens, the GFR, the glomerular filtration rate, is decreased. In AKI the GFR is decreased, and whenever the GFR decreased, what happens, let us suppose this is, we have our nephron, this is a proximal convoluted tubule, this is a, let's suppose, loop of Henle, and let's suppose this is a distal convoluted tubule, and this, let's suppose this is the collecting duct, and let us suppose this is our glomerulus. Let us suppose this is a glomerulus. Now we should understand that what happens in acute kidney injury, basically the amount that is filtered out in the glomerulus is basically decreased. So that we will say that GFR is decreased, and if the GFR decreased, then what happens, then the more solute is basically absorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule, and whenever the fluid that is having, now if the more solute is absorbed in the PCT, then the fluid that reaches the macula densa, I mean whenever it reaches the distal convoluted tubule, the distal convoluted tubule has a cell known as macula densa cell. Macula densa cell, and these cells basically sense the sodium in the filtrate. So they sense basically the sodium, and as we know, the sodium level is decreased as in PCT already the more amount of salt is absorbed. So more Na plus is actually absorbed in PCT. That's why there is a less sodium reaching the distal convoluted tubule, and whenever there is a less sodium reaching the distal convoluted tubule, it will activate the macula densa cell, and the macula densa cell will ultimately act on the JG cells, that is juxtaglomerular cells, and these juxtaglomerular cells will release the renin, and this renin, so this renin, what it will do, it will ultimately activate the renin angiotensin aldosterone system. So RAS system is activated. This is known as renin angiotensin aldosterone system. So this system is basically activated, and once this RAS system is activated, what happens, that it will lead to the compensatory volume overload. It will lead to compensatory volume overload in the blood. As whenever this RAS system is activated, they will cause increased absorption of the solute, and they will actually solute and water, basically the water content from the filtrate, they will absorb more, and due to which there will be more blood volume. So we will say that there is a volume overload in the blood, in the circulatory system. So this is known as compensatory type of volume overload, and due to this volume overload, actually increases the capillary hydrostatic pressure in all areas of body, And whenever there is increased capillary hydrostatic pressure, increased CHP means capillary hydrostatic pressure. So whenever this capillary hydrostatic pressure is increased, then it will lead to the periorbital edema. Periorbital edema, that is the edema around your eyes. So this is the person, so there will be edema around the eyes, so this is known as periorbital edema. There will be the pedal edema, that is the edema in the legs, so there will be the pedal edema. And there will be also will be the pulmonary edema, that is the edema in the lungs, so there will be edema in the lungs. There will be edema of the legs, so edema of the legs. And due to this the pulmonary edema will lead to basically dyspnea, that is a difficulty in breathing. So there will be difficulty in breathing, there will be the pedal edema, there will be periorbital edema. So these are the basically symptoms you can see in the case of acute kidney injury. And you should know one fact, that usually the edema of the kidney origin starts from the edema that is due to if kidney problem or kidney disease, we can say kidney disease, basically starts from face, that is the periorbital edema, and then it progresses to the arms, and yes, sometimes legs can be affected first, so pedal edema. So but you should know that it will first affect the face, then only it descends downward. So that kind of edema happens in case of acute kidney injury. The third type of symptom is basically anuria. So anuria means there will be absent either very less urine output, so decreased urine output in case of this acute kidney injury. Anemia is very common in almost all kidney disease, either that is CKD or acute kidney injury. Anemia is very common. And why the anemia is common? First thing is that there is a hormone known as erythropoietin. And we should know that this erythropoietin hormone is basically produced in the kidney capillaries, produced by the kidney capillaries cells. And whenever there is a problem in the kidney, or like in the acute kidney injury, the capillary production of erythropoietin basically decreases, and due to decreased erythropoietin production, there will be decreased RBC synthesis. Second thing is that there will be hemolysis in many cases of the acute kidney injury, like in case of hemolytic uremic syndrome, like in case of the sepsis. So in different condition of AKI, the hemolysis occurs, and due to which also anemia can be manifested. But anemia is a sign. The patient will tell you the history, like they are easily fatigued and they have the breathing difficulty. So these are the symptoms associated with the anemia.